Wache Saninnawap Indigenous Kaz and Kitchenuhmaykoosib Inninuwug Wapinnamaykoosib My name is Saninnawap. I'm from Big Trout Lake, formerly known as Big Trout Lake. Now it's the legal name for it is Kitchenuhmaykoosib Inninuwug. That's where I'm from. And I grew up about 20 kilometers west of KI in a trap line in a log cabin with my parents and my two late siblings. That's where we grew up. Every fall we would leave around September and we would head back to the reserve KI. I will call it KI, Kitchenuhmaykoosib Inninuwug. We would head back around December. So I was there maybe 3 months, the beginning of the year, and we would, the teachers there would give us homework, but we didn't have anybody to help us with the homework because my parents didn't speak English, so we couldn't do our homework. Plus, I didn't want to do my homework at Trapline. I enjoyed being out with my parents and my late siblings. I enjoyed being with them and learning the way of life, speaking the language, trapping and hunting, preparing traditional food, and just basically living off the land by what our parents were teaching us, what our ancestors taught us. So that's how we lived when I was a child growing up. In the fall, that's what we did, in September to December. But in May, we would leave again around April, May, and sometime in June we would go back. So for hunting season, which would be in April, sometime mid-April, we would leave again. We would leave because Big Trout is a big lake, we would leave by the snow machine, elans, skidoo, whatever they were called back then. We would leave around April, and then we would take our boat, a big boat, about 14 to 16 feet long, along with our stuff, because the reason why we took our boat is because we went out hunting for geese and also trapping muskrats. And then we would go up the river, which would be about 5 rapids up from where our cabin used to be. We would go up there and go get fresh white fish. That would be my dad and my mom and my 2 siblings. We would go by canoe and we would haul of our things that we need. We would go up there for like 2 or 3 days. So when we did that, we had our fresh food, fresh fish, white fish. And then we would have our makeshift, my dad had this fridge he would utilize ice, and from the ice that we still had ice then, so he would make a little fridge, I would call it. I don't know how to call it in the language. We would use moss and ice, and we would put our traditional foods on there. So that's how we were able to preserve our food. And so we did that in the spring. And once it starts thawing around the lake, it's a big lake, the ice doesn't melt till maybe around end of June. So around the lake, it would start thawing. It would start, the lakes, we would go around the lake with our boat, the one that we took with us. And it was a lot of work because all of us, we had to like, sometimes we would have to haul our big boat to go over the ice because there was no opening yet. So that was my history where I grew up, growing up on the land with my parents who spoke the language and my siblings. And that was one of the best times growing up there, learning, responsibility, learning hard work, and learning how to take care of our home through like cutting wood, getting water from the lake, which you have to like use a chisel thingy to cut open the ice in order to get your lake water, fresh water. Yeah, it was hard work, and I believe that I'm so grateful that my father was able to teach me the way of life, especially the responsibility that comes with that. And I'm not saying life was perfect then. What I'm saying is that this is how I grew up, and this is where I learned to be independent. And then after that, I went to high school. Like majority of the time, I didn't go to school by the sounds of what I'm saying with my history, how I grew up. I would say half the time, or not even half the time, I was in school. But I think education is important today, and even back then, that was my education growing up, on the land with my parents' teachings. We learned a lot of things, traditional way of life, medicines we used for when we got sick or when we got hurt. So we learned all that. I went to high school in Oshawa, Ontario. My dad's cousin lived there. So it was a big difference from trap line to a reserve to a big city. And then I went to North Bay. That's where I seen Kathleen and them. Even though we grew up in Big Trout, but all of a sudden I see Kathleen and her siblings. And then I went to Sault Ste. Marie, and I didn't really like it there. I don't know why I didn't like it. And then I went back to North Bay. And then I came here in Thunder Bay, and I've been here ever since. On and off, I've been here. So I didn't finish high school when I was here in Thunder Bay because I was going through some stuff, and I was drinking and doing all kinds of crazy stuff. So I went home, back to KI, and I needed 7 credits, but I knew I needed to go back because it wasn't safe here for me because of the risky behaviors that I was doing. So I went home, took care of my niece, who happens to be around 4 years old that time. I think I might have been 18. So I raised her for a number of years after that, on and off. Most of the time she was with me. So during that time when I was taking care of her, my brother, the one I grew up with in a trap line, he committed suicide. He was 23, and I think I might have been around 21. And that was my first ever heartbreak to ever experience. And during this time, when I was taking care of my niece, I took WASA courses. And, with the courses that I was taking on distance, they were distance courses. So in order for me to finish those courses, which I did, it takes, self-motivation and determination that you want to reach your goal to get your high school diploma. and I finished it in the midst of what was going on around my family that time. So I graduated um, high school. I got my diploma, and but it was during around that time when I graduated that I was back to doing what I was doing, drinking and not really knowing how to cope with the loss of my brother. So that's what I did for a couple years. Just lost everything basically, like my niece and also my relationship that I had then. So I graduated, and then I was drinking and doing all kinds of stuff then. And it took me a while to get back on my feet. Um, I got after a while, I helped myself, and then I started. I took this program. We had an Academy of Learning here back then, and I took a program just to see if I can, finish it, and I did. I finished that program, and I even paid it myself through the student loans, and I completed it, and I got that diploma. And then I had my son. I ended up having a baby, and I went home. It was when I had my daughter. When I had my son and my daughter, when he was 2 years old, I had another baby, my daughter, and a relationship that I was in with the father. It wasn't a very healthy relationship, very dysfunctional, and I didn't want to bring my kids up in a home that is not safe, that is not healthy for them. At the same time, when that was happening, I was going to college. Um, I was taking a social service worker program at the college, and during that time, the whole 2 years I was trying to go, it wasn't a very. The college was good. I enjoyed. I made a lot of friends. To this day, I still talk to some of them, but the personal life wasn't very good because of the relationship that I had. Wasn't very healthy, and I had to stop 5 weeks prior to graduating uh, because I just couldn't do it anymore. It was pretty bad. So I stopped and I went home to KI, and I worked there as a residential counselor, social work field. And luckily, the lady that was a coordinator for that program made it happen for me to graduate through PLAR, prior learning assessment. So she managed to, she's the one that suggested if I want to finish it. She just needed certain things, and the last 5 weeks of college that I needed to do, I completed it the following year. So I was able to receive my diploma that way. So I was very grateful for that. And then after that, I worked for a couple years, and then I went to university. When I was at university, I was registered for honors Bachelor of Social Work, but I wasn't sure if I wanted to go into social work. So I kind of changed 3 times exactly what I wanted to do, because at the time I wasn't sure exactly what I wanted to do. But during that time, my sibling, my sister, the one I grew up with in a trap line, she committed suicide. And she had 8 kids. And during that time, I had to pause my educational goals because of that reason, to help look after, sort out what should happen to my nieces and nephews, that were 8 of them, that were left behind by the mother and also the father a month and a half prior. So that was a big responsibility, and was very stressful. Got to the point where I felt I didn't need to, didn't feel like going on with life. It was just a bit too much for me. So I stopped going to, I didn't go to university. I stopped going to my classes. I was even thinking maybe it's time that I just end my life. That was just too much for me. And what kept me going is I met a friend who was there for me throughout the whole time and helped me heal from all the past things that happened in my life. So the healing process happened. So I took time off from university to focus on myself and my healing. So eventually, one of my friends up north asked me, "What do you need to get your degree?" I says, half a credit. And I'm like, half a credit? That's what she said. So I'm like, okay, okay, I'll do it. Cause, so I got my half a credit and got my degree from university. And to this day, I'm grateful for the achievements that I have. It's through hard work, commitment, determination, and not for anything to hold you back when you want to achieve your goals and your dreams. My advice for particularly people up north, students up north, or youth that are wanting to further their education, and I just want to say, in order to achieve them, you have to set your mind. You have to set your mind and say, okay, this is my goal. No matter what comes my way, no matter what happens, that I'm going to reach this goal. If, or when something does happen, it's a setback, and not to give up. Just, if you need to, set it aside and then come back and continue what you want to achieve, whatever goals that you may have. Even if you go to like a distance education, you just have to, believe in yourself that you are going to achieve this goal. And self-motivation is something that a lot of us don't really have. But if you could, tell yourself that you can do this and that you can ask for help through like teachers, your mentors, whoever that you want to talk with, that will help you, go to that person and ask for help, and continue reaching your goal, whatever it is that you are wanting sorry, whatever your goal is in terms of educational goals. Even with even if it's not educational goals, whether you're struggling with mental health, like anxiety, for example, a lot of times, it's hard that to keep going when you're struggling with anxiety, because anxiety is scary. It's like it's very scary experience, and um, sometimes that doesn't help because you're going through a mental health, but you don't know how to deal with whatever issue you're dealing with. Um, but there's help out there. I maintain my language, but that's hard to do when you don't have anybody else to communicate with using the language. It gets lost or set aside, and the more you don't use it, the more you don't know how to say words properly in your language. So it's very important to keep in contact with people that speak the language, which would be the elderly and people around our age, which or older. Um, there are a few that I know of that don't speak the language. I would roughly say around under the age of 30 have lost the language. There are some that can understand the language, but there are some that can speak some words of the language. So to maintain communication with the elders and people that speak the language, and also teaching yourself the language, I think that's who we are as Anishinaabe, our language, and the connection to the land that we have. And for the connection for the land that we have, I believe that how I maintained it while I was in the mainstream society is going on the land. There is land out here that you can go and practice your traditional way of life. And if you're here for high school, there are some high schools that have access to those traditional way of life that help the students to make sure that they maintain their way of life when they come to the city. And that's how I was able to preserve mine, was just going on the land, being connected, going hunting, fishing. Yeah, that's how I was able to maintain it here while I'm here. But when I'm out there, I do the same thing when I'm on my reserve. So I go back and forth, my reserve. Yeah. Thank you for listening and for this opportunity to share my story. And I hope that someone out there is going to be encouraged not to give up and to keep going and striving for your goals and your dreams. And I just want to say miigwech kananakuman kanach toshianogam gagi shigag gagi nachtaman hue gagi witamonan geni nandika kishianam se anga pagakishkunuan ego gabab matsyan anga dutaman andiga nojumunyayan. For overall my well-being is seeking the help that I need. And one thing I want to add is that when you're going through a rough time, whether it may be losing a family member, friend, whatever loss you may have, just allow yourself to feel and not to resort to drinking or drugs, because that's going to create even more problems. Miigwech.